I'm Jen Rattay. It's my great honor to serve the SV2 community as Executive Director. Another great honor I have is to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Jessica Jackley, who is a longtime dear friend. About a decade ago, Jessica and I worked side by side together, desk by desk, at the Stanford Graduate School of Business's Center for Social Innovation. And it was right around that time that she went on a transformative trip to experience on the ground some time in East Africa that was made possible by a special organization, SV2 grantee, Village Enterprise. Around that time, Jessica began conceiving of Kiva, which quickly became the world's first peer-to-peer microlending website. And fast forward to today, a decade later, Kiva's facilitated more than $750 million in loans among individuals across 200 countries. Jessica's full bio is in the program, so I won't repeat its many impressive details. Instead, I thought I would share just a few words that pop to mind when I think of Jessica. And I'm not talking about the impressive what of Jessica's career, but what I think is the equally, if not more impressive, how she does everything that she does. And that is by being fearless, humble, a disruptor of outdated paradigms, a lifetime listener and learner, a loving working mother, a leader, and a serial, and I mean serial, unlocker of human potential. And we're just so excited. Jessica has a new book out, Clay, Water, Brick, Finding Inspiration from Entrepreneurs Who Do the Most with the Least, and we have signed copies for each of you here. Please welcome to the stage tonight's keynote, Jessica Jackley.
Very kind. Thank you. And incredibly special for me to have, to be here with all of you and to get to have a dear friend give that kind introduction. So I'd like to dive in as well. It's very hard to follow those two acts, right? Do you agree? I mean, unlucky me right now. Man, I'm going to dive in and like my friends here did, I'm going to tell you stories. Two quick ones just to illustrate how I like to think about this theme of unlocking human potential. And in fact, these are two people that I met a decade ago during my time on the ground in East Africa doing an internship with Village Enterprise. And the first is a gentleman that I admire so much that I thought he was worthy of naming a book after. This gentleman lived in Uganda, near Tororo, actually, which was already mentioned too, which is so great. I have reference points. And basically, he told me his story as it had unfolded over the previous few years. This was 10 years back. Patrick had fled the northern area of the country after a rebel group attacked his village, and he settled with family, distant cousins, near Tororo. And he decided to start fresh. Had to, start from virtually nothing. He fled with just his brother. Most of his family was lost. He had no possessions. He was young, uneducated, hardly had anything. I mean, didn't have shoes on his feet, but had a strong desire to make life better for himself and his brother. So one day, he literally, right, not in a cliche way, not rolled up his sleeves in air quotes here and got his hands dirty, but literally decided as he was kind of sitting, figuring out how he was going to feed himself and his brother that day, dug into the earth and started to dig. He started to dig and to learn and to explore. And he realized that there were parts of the earth, parts of the dirt that were different, these clay deposits. And if he mixed those patches of clay with water, he could slowly form them and form bricks. Now, he took something, the ground beneath his feet and started to make it into something valuable. Took almost nothing and made it into something. And he started to, again, with his bare hands, make these bricks, was able to sell them for just the equivalent of fractions of a penny each, a few shillings. He saved up, got better and better at making those bricks and selling those bricks, and eventually was able to buy a brick mold that looked somewhat like this. Now, it might not look like a big deal. It took him a while to save up enough to purchase something like this. But this allowed him to double his production instantly and to make bricks that were more evenly and consistently shaped and sized. Big deal. He was able to sell these bricks more quickly. He was able to sell them for a little bit more. And you can imagine where this goes. So he saved up even more. And while baking his bricks in the sun was quite effective, he knew that the bricks would be made stronger and would sell for even a little bit more if he could bake them in a self-contained kiln. So he saved up, went to a nearby village, learned how to do this, and then sold his baked bricks for even more. So fast forward even more. Eventually he was able to hire his brother and then a neighbor and replace his homemade implements. He was off to the races. And by the time I met him, he, just like Apophia and Joseph and so many others, was able to kind of show off his incredible accomplishments, the ways that his life had been improved thanks to his hard work, his vision for the future, and his incredible business that had been supported by Village Enterprise. Now, I'm going to tell you a different story, and this was, I want to be very clear, a much rarer story. In fact, it's so rare that it stood out for me, 10 years later as I think back to the most impressionable moments, meeting for the first time these incredible entrepreneurs who did the most with the least, who've inspired the rest of my career. I met a woman named Fatuma about 700 miles due south of where I met Patrick, ish, outside of Dodoma, Tanzania. Now, Fatuma was equally eager to welcome me and to show off what she had done, but her story kind of stopped short in a way that is, again, really stuck with me. It's been like an itch for 10 years because I've wondered and wondered about why her story was so different. Now, she pulled me into her home. I don't know how many of you have gotten the wonderful opportunity, but I hope many of you will this summer with Village Enterprise, to go into mud homes like this. I'm kind of a connoisseur. I think it's incredibly interesting. And some of the homes look like this when you walk inside. Well lit, lots of stuff around, quite homey and cozy, and you think, yeah, maybe I could do this, which is not, that's giving myself a little too much credit. Fatuma's home looked a lot more like this. It was very basic. There was a mattress in the corner, and there were 2 chairs and a table, and that's it. This is where she lived with her family. She began to tell me how, she had received funding and had done very well with her business activities after she had gone through the training and gotten funding from Village Enterprise. Unfortunately, as I looked around, I was very confused because on paper, her records that she showed me demonstrated that her business had done so well that, my adrenaline was going. I thought, we have a rags to riches story on our hands here. Like, this is going to be a big deal, like front of the marketing brochure. This is great, right? But I asked her how she had used the proceeds from her business, all of her profits, because her business was growing, but not at such a rate that it looked like all of them were back in. And long story short, I pushed and pushed, probably a little bit obnoxiously, but I was so curious. And she finally said, I'll tell you. And she got a little bit quiet and got a smile on her face, went to the other side of her hut and pounded the ground and said, "It's in the World Bank." Ha ha ha. She literally buried the money in the ground, okay? It was a great joke, right? I thought that was really clever. I thought that was pretty great. And look, I am all for savings. There's so many caveats I could give her. It could be its own lecture. She was awesome, right? She had done so much. But she had stopped short of realizing her full potential. It was clear. She had stopped out of a kind of fear. And while I don't understand the rest of his story, and unfortunately I haven't kept in touch, and my records were not the most accurate, and I can't look her up and call her or go visit her again, but I remember her story so much because it made me wonder, gosh, why? Why is Patrick's story different? Why is it so different from Fatuma's? Why did she stop short of reaching her potential? And in short, why do some people dig and unearth amazing things out of almost nothing? And why do some people bury the treasures that they do have? Dig or bury? And I think, we're here tonight to talk about what's the secret of unlocking human potential. And I think, just my opinion, but I think it comes down to 2 things. One, I think it comes down to the stories that we tell ourselves, about other people, and about the world, and how fervently we believe those stories to be true about the future. Can it be better tomorrow than it is today? And secondly, I think that unlocking potential does have something to do with entrepreneurship, a particular kind of entrepreneurship. So look, my favorite academic definition of entrepreneurship is Howard Stevenson's. He says that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. Now, I'll say it again because I think it's an awesome definition and actually quite romantic. Like, I swoon a little bit when I hear it, even when I'm saying it myself. So I'll say it again. It's the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. It's romantic, right? Without regard to a stumble or a fall, even if you don't have the resources, the financial or other resources that you need, even if a challenge comes up, regardless of what the world might tell you that you don't have, or why you're not qualified to take the next step forward. Maybe you have the wrong education or not enough education, or the wrong experience, or you're too young, or you're too old, or there's always something that we can believe that tells us we should stop where we are and not keep going forward towards the dreams we have for the future and how it can be better. And the great entrepreneurs that I've met, like Patrick and so many others throughout the years, believe that the future can be different, have a very clear picture of what that can look like, and they're so convinced that they're willing to override the things that come at them, the barriers that come up day to day, to keep running after those things. Now, they're compelled forward by a story about the future, and they believe it so much they begin to see themselves in that future. It becomes very real to them. So look, how do we get there? How do we be believers of these stories too, of the best possible future? I think it takes practice and housekeeping. I think it takes a lot of discipline to sort through the stories that we've absorbed over the years that have lodged themselves in our minds and our hearts, and to either, to clean them out, right? But to reiterate the ones that are the most true and that give us the most hope and give us the most sense of possibility for the future. So let me give you an example. Oh, sorry, I pulled up an old presentation for myself. All right, I'm going to just skip to this one. In my own life, I've had to revisit stories again and again that have told me that people who live very different lives than I've gotten to live, living in poverty, only have stories of sadness and suffering. I've been told by a lot of well-intentioned organizations and individuals that their story is a desperate one, a hopeless one. And stories like this certainly called me to action many times in my life, over the first few decades of my life. But they also, and I would always act, not always, but usually, right? I would hear a sad story about poverty, something that was, again, focused on suffering and desperation and hopelessness, and I would feel natural human reactions, guilt, maybe even shame about my own relative middle-class American wealth. I would feel terrible, heartbroken, if I'd really listen to them and take them in. And I would call the 1-800 number or whatever I was told to do to feel better for myself. And so at my worst, I would call, I would get involved, I would throw my change in the jar, so to speak, and I'd feel okay, I'd feel better temporarily. A few weeks later, I'd get a nice letter telling me that thanks so much for the donation, but there's more bad news, and we need another donation. And the stories kept coming, and my panic kept coming, the asks kept coming, but I felt like there was just something wrong with this relationship because I realized that my participation was in this story that I didn't fully believe. I didn't think it was all that. I thought that was one-sided, right? It wasn't all bad news. These were human beings that had other sides of the story too. But I couldn't find those stories right away. I didn't know where to look for them. And I started to tune out. Again, natural human defense mechanisms, I think. An invisible barrier sort of started to form between me and these other people that I so longed to help and be useful to and to serve. Until one day when I heard a news story about poverty and potential and entrepreneurship. So I was working at Stanford, near Jen, and one day a gentleman named Dr. Muhammad Yunus came to campus to speak. Now, for me, I'd never heard about this guy before. I really had no idea what microfinance was. I studied philosophy and poetry, and I didn't know the difference between profit and revenue, for real. And here I was working in the business school. Anyway, so I heard, there was an email blast that went out on campus that said, Dr. Yunus coming to speak. This was the fall of 2003, 3 years before he and his Grameen Bank would win the Nobel Peace Prize in their pioneering work in modern microfinance. But again, I had no idea who the guy was, but I went to hear him speak anyway. Thought, why not? I'll stay late after work and check it out. Sat in the back of the classroom. There were about 50 people there. I sat in the back so I could leave if it wasn't exciting, right? Just to spell that out. I was critical, is what I'm trying to say. But he spoke, he told his story, and I was very moved. First, he talked about microfinance. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that microlending, microcredit, and all the other products and services under that umbrella of microfinance existed. The idea that this little bit of capital, microgrants, all these versions, this little bit of capital at the right moment in time could do amazing things in a person's life. That was news to me. Second, he talked about his own story in a very accessible way. Even me, this philosophy major who had no idea what to put on her resume, thought maybe I could do what he did. He told us that his work really began when he stopped what he was doing, went and sat with people, a group of women in a village, kind of on the other side of town, across the way, and asked them directly why they were poor. Forget economic theories and academia, and he was a professor. He sat and just listened really well, really carefully. And I thought, maybe naively, maybe I could do that. So, one, wow, microfinance existed, right? Two, here's this great man who started his work by listening. And I'm talking pretty quickly up here at you, but I can listen well too. I'd like to think that I can. I try to. So I thought maybe I could do that too. And then third, most important, he talked about poverty and he talked about the stories of people living with great economic need in a totally new way for me than I had heard before. He talked about people who were smart and strong and hardworking and had lives full of triumphs and successes as well as challenges, but who just needed access to this resource so they could continue to move forward. They were doing everything right. They were just trapped in a system and in a scenario that didn't allow them to reach their potential, to unlock their potential. And for them, this particular kind of person at this particular moment in time, that little loan was the thing that unlocked their potential. And I thought this was the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And by the way, I heard him talk all night about the poor and didn't feel terrible, didn't feel guilty and shameful and awful. I felt inspired. And that invisible barrier, I wanted to break it down right away. And so I begged my way into an internship with Village Enterprise. I went to East Africa, and the rest is history. I got to, indeed, really believe in a different story for the future, for other people, for the world, and even for myself. And I wanted to be in that. I saw myself in this different story. I wanted to be around the amazing individuals who, yes, lived in poverty, but had great hope for the future, who, perhaps already had a success story, truly inspiring stories of success in the past. They had maybe started with a needle and thread under the shade of a tree, but now had capital equipment and an office. I met people who insisted on a story of abundance, and I encountered them in scenes of abundance, not scarcity. And I met people who saw themselves as givers, not takers, not receivers. And encountering this ability to hope, this ability to live out that hope and to keep taking steps forward despite incredible obstacles inspired me. And it changed me. And that's, I'm going to quickly get to the end here. I think I'm at time. Yeah, we're good? I am, but thank you for saying I'm also good, but I'm going to be quick. That's very nice of you. So look, I was so inspired by these stories and this idea that genuinely the future could be different. I really believed it. And I wanted to be like these entrepreneurs that I'd met that every day were overcoming incredible obstacles and kept moving forward despite everything against them. I wanted to tell those new stories to the world. So my co-founder Matt and I put those stories on a website. People like Sophia put up their loan needs. The people that we met, at first the 7 borrowers were in East Africa and Uganda, but it grew quickly from there. We put their stories online and then asked the world to help. And they did. And Kiva grew very quickly, as you said. So look, the world has changed a lot since I was a kid, listening to Sally Struthers. Oh no, did I? You know what, I'm so sorry. I was working from a different presentation, but I can do this. So the world's changed a lot. I think there are a lot of other better stories, different stories, to inspire us. I think organizations like Village Enterprise tell those stories. And they're literally fueling and empowering and cheering on these incredible entrepreneurs, the protagonists in these stories, living out, getting towards this better future. Organizations like Somos Mayfair are doing this too. And their work makes it easier for the rest of us, I think, to find the stories that can convince us that the future can be so much better for others and for ourselves as well. I know for me, stories like this told me that there was only one way to respond, that the world only needed me to do something small and discreet and kind of transactional. And I know that's not what everyone in this room knows and believes, but I'm here to remind us. For me, understanding a new story told me that I could be an entrepreneur too. Maybe I could live like Patrick, like Fatuma, and live like these entrepreneurs that I had met. So I know it's hard to do, to keep taking steps forward no matter what. It's easy to get stuck. And the problems we all want to help fix are very big. It can be discouraging. It can feel overwhelming. It can make us panic, at least me. But we have everything we need to help unlock the potential of others around us and of ourselves, to unearth greatness in every person in Silicon Valley and the Great Rift Valley and everywhere in between. And I think every human being on the planet, I'm sorry, it's totally cheating. I'm ending on a kid picture, but I'm doing it. Okay. So every human being on this planet deserves this, right? Deserves to know these truths, the truest stories, the best stories of what's possible, the fullest picture, the most hopeful picture of our collective story. So help me, help all of us, remind everybody that we encounter. We're ambassadors here, that there's a better story out there to be told and to cling to and to believe so fervently that we can do whatever we need to do day after day to take steps forwards toward it. That opportunity is everywhere. The potential exists all around and especially within each one of us. We're each born with everything we need to keep taking those steps forward. Thank you.